Good evening. Tonight is a special meeting of Mahomet. I think all of our meetings are special, but this is technically a special meeting of the Mahomet-Seymour Board of Education, and we're calling it to order. It is 7 p.m. on Tuesday, October 15th. This time I'd like everyone who's a guest to please sign in. Remind everyone to please silence their cell phones. Visitors, in order to facilitate an effective meeting, we will ask those who wish to make comments to the board to read the visitor guidelines found on the table outside the door. Complete the public participation form and bring those to dawn. Roll call for attendance, please.
Giles.
Here.
Keith.
Here.
Hendricks.
Here.
Schultz. Here. Larson. Here. Hennessy. Here. McComb.
Here. This time let's stand for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Board members, you've had the agenda and had a chance to review it. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda for this one.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the agenda?
I move to amend the agenda to remove the closed session on security and litigation. I'm the one that asked for it to be on there, the safety, and I really want to talk about it.
Okay.
But our board policy says that we can only talk about things in a special meeting that are on the stated purpose of the special meeting. And I had requested that the safety and litigation be added to the purpose, but when we received the email, the only stated purpose was the follow-up, and so that makes it unable for us to talk about anything else at this meeting.
I'm not sure that that applies to closed session. I think closed session means as long as we state the purpose before we go into closed session, and we go into closed session for legitimate closed session reasons, and we state those prior to going in, I think we're good with that. That's always been my interpretation of that.
I think that the actual rule says no matters will be discussed, considered, or brought before the board at any special meeting other than such matters as were included in the stated purpose of the meeting. So while we could go into closed session, no problem, we can't go into closed session to have anything discussed, considered, or presented. And I'm the person that wants this the most. Following the rules is easy when it gives you the outcome you want, and following the rules is hard when the outcome isn't what you want, and this isn't what I want. I really want to discuss safety, but I think integrity demands that we follow the rules all the time. And so that's why I have to move that we
I guess I need clarity on that though, just to be sure that we really are unable to, because there hasn't been a stated purpose before the meeting, with the closed session.
Well, we did get a stated, the email said, per board policy 2200, a special meeting's purpose must be stated to the Board of Education. At such a meeting, only topics presented in the purpose can be discussed, considered, or brought before the Board of Education. The purpose of the special meeting on October 15th at 7 p.m. in the MPE boardroom is to have follow-up discussion regarding the topics presented and discussed at the 9/14 joint meeting.
What was the board policy that addressed the special meetings?
The board policy,
200.
the board policy says no matters will be discussed, considered, or brought before the board at any special meeting other than such matters as were included in the stated purpose of the meeting.
The same board policy under closed session also says the board may hold a closed meeting or close a portion of a meeting by a majority vote of a quorum taken at an open meeting. The vote of each board member present and the reason for the closed meeting will be publicly discussed at the time of the meeting and clearly stated in the motion and the meeting minutes. The purpose of the closed session was also on the agenda. So I think, Colleen, this is not a matter of integrity, it's just a matter of interpreting board policy differently. So I don't believe it's appropriate to imply that I acted without integrity by sending out the email that I sent out.
No, I didn't say the email was without integrity. I'm suggesting that us discussing something not in the purpose would not be in keeping with our policy. So I made no statement about the email. I'm simply saying, and once again, I'm the one that wants to talk about this quite a bit.
Was
I've asked several times, right?
The purpose we received, is that what was put out to the public? Is it the same?
No purpose was put out to the public. They just received the agenda.
Okay.
Is there a reason we didn't put out a purpose that included all of those things? I mean, it
It
seems
was
like,
on the agenda.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, I don't see a problem with it if it was published on the agenda.
but the Open Meetings Act is pretty clear about special meetings. Special meetings are different than normal board meetings and normal open meetings. And they're very specific about stating a purpose because you don't want to bait and switch. You don't want to say you're having a meeting about something and then start talking about something else and not have informed the public. So the rules about special meetings are even more restricted than other normal open meetings.
I understand that, but I mean, it seems like that there is the option for a closed session through a vote
Right.
to,
And closed session is never open to the public.
yeah.
But it seems to me that it's pretty clear that it has to be because a closed session, so if we wanted to go in and talk about, I don't know,
Setting a price.
setting a price for the junior high is about the only thing I can think of that's related to, you know, what we talked about in the first meeting that we're following up on tonight, would be the only thing that was available for closed session discussion tonight that has to do with the purpose of the meeting.
So under that line of thinking, then we're not gonna be able to talk about litigation also, is that?
Yeah,
That's what I was wondering too.
that's what I think. I mean, that's why I can't understand why we
Never been
didn't.
how we interpreted closed session.
And once again, it was published and listed, and we didn't talk about it until right now.
Well, I think Colleen made a phone call and asked
Colleen
that
and I
the
talked
purpose
about it last week,
be,
The litigation
mean-
part, though?
just about this issue.
This whole thing.
Okay, next we're talking about the litigation part, right?
So was the purpose posted on the district's main office as the policy requires? Was the media notified?
Yes, through the posting of the agenda. The agendas have always served as the notice to the meeting.
So the policy also
So
says,
here's the purpose right here.
right,
Follow-up discussion to September 4th. This is what was posted publicly.
so
Along with the agenda.
it says that a meeting agenda shall accompany the notice. That seems to imply that the notice is something separate.
We've never done a separate notice and agenda. If that's the direction the board wants to head, we can do that, but the notice and agenda have always been the same document.
Well, it seems to me we either need to change the practice going forward or change the policy. Unless, is this in the Open Meetings Act?
Yes.
Oh, well, then we know what our option is.
I think the author couldn't have imagined all these variables. I think the purpose is in the agenda as it was stated, and that we're okay going into closed session.
The topic's on there, that's what we stay on.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Colleen asked that we amend the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Is there a second on that?
second,
Okay. So,
Colleen, are you prepared to discuss it tonight? What's the?
I'm prepared to discuss it. Once again, my objection is not that I don't want to do it. It's that I feel as though I
But I guess
should
I
be a
understand,
person
I
who's
understand that part,
consistent
but
about.
what part of this is not being published though? If this is published, the agenda is published with the notice, then the public has notice. I don't understand how we're not following the Open Meetings Act.
We made a statement of the purpose of the meeting and said this is the purpose as required by the policy. So the policy was followed there. but the rule says you can't talk about anything today at this meeting that's not on that purpose. That's why I asked for all 4 things to be included on purpose.
Can I ask a more practical question? I think I know what the litigation is about, and I don't think that's a pressing matter. Is the student safety thing a pressing matter that we really need to address tonight? Or can we put this off just for the sake of following our rules to the letter?
I would like to talk about it soon, if not now in the meeting on the 21st.
And if it's litigation related, if we're totally fiscally conscious, like it's been stated in meetings, then we need to address it so that we can figure out going forward, because each time we wait, there's usually more time and money involved in it. So I don't know why we wouldn't stick to that precedent.
So can it keep for a week? I don't know, because I'm not sure if it's just the one matter or not.
I mean, I think the frustrating part here is we keep trying to point out where just because past precedent didn't follow the policy, doesn't mean you keep breaking a rule once you know that.
I have to
I'm not
push
sure-
back.
Interpretation.
I'm not sure
It's
past
an
president broke.
interpretation of the policy. I didn't intentionally break the policy, and I just appreciate that not continuing to be conveyed publicly. I interpreted the policy differently than Mrs. Schultz. So the board then needs
I
to
didn't make
decide.
any accusation that anything that's happened up to this point has violated any
I'm not
policy.
saying that you did. I was
No, no,
responding to Mrs.
right,
Hennessy.
I was
Responded
just
that right there.
being clear that
I
I'm
guess-
not saying that.
My question is, if Colleen called and asked for the purpose to be 4 things before the purpose went out, why wasn't the purpose 4 things? I mean, that would have cleared this all up and we wouldn't have had any confusion.
Sure, but I don't also think this is the appropriate venue to talk about the details and the contents of our call. There's a little bit more to it. If the board does not desire to go into closed session tonight, it can wait.
I think effectively the title of that agenda could have said purpose. I think purpose is stated and they were covered.
In the past, the agenda has always served as the purpose. Now,
I think we need to put it off. But I guess we can have a vote and we can go with that. But I don't intend to go into closed session and say anything because I feel very uncomfortable, especially since we asked to have it clarified in the purpose and we didn't do that. I think we missed an opportunity. And so I think we need to push this to next week.
I'm fine with that, we wasted 15 minutes already, so we just vote.
okay, so the motion is to approve the agenda eliminating security. We've not eliminated closed session.
I think she said eliminate closed session because neither of those were on the
She has to
purpose.
strike security, I
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I did say security and litigation.
believe. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the
So we
motion
have-
on the table is to approve the agenda and striking closed session. Is that everyone's understanding?
Yes.
Roll call vote on that, please.
Hennessy,
Yes?
Schultz,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Giles,
No.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Larson. Yes. McComb.
No. Okay. We've approved the agenda, less the closed session. Public comment, do we have any public comment?
No.
Okay. So, we're here tonight, to have a follow-up discussion to the joint meeting we had with the village. What I would propose and what I am thinking will work well is we want to allow approximately, I think, around 90 minutes to discuss it, and I would like to do, in a foreshadowing of things to come, take 30 minutes at the end. And if anybody has is here, kind of like we would do during a levy hearing or something like that. If there's questions that the public has, we can take some time at the end and listen to those. Certainly, this is an investigative night for us all. We are not taking action on any of this tonight. This is just an opportunity, it's more or less a study type session under a special meeting for us to be able to kind of wrap our heads around the different pieces of this and digest some of this, okay? I'm going to propose that we break the discussion down into 3 areas. The first part being the TIF, the second part being the village's interest in the junior high, and the third part being how this potentially rolls up into a new intergovernmental agreement with the village to replace the one from 2000, whatever year that was. 11, that's what I think so too. Okay. We've got some folks from the village here with us tonight. Much like when we have an insurance issue and the insurance people here, or a bond issue and the bond people here, since it's a village issue, they've been gracious to be here tonight, and we will use them as a resource from time to time as we go through this. But let's start with the TIF part of it, if everyone's agreeable to that. I think you got some handouts here, did you not? And we're going to do. Okay. And Trent, you got some stuff ready to go. On the TIF part of it, and I'll just start with a little bit of background and then we'll just launch into discussion and questions, I guess. Originally, when we executed the intergovernmental agreement, you see Churchill Road, here's the roundabout. You see Churchill Road, this is where it approximately stops right now. And the original plan was to bring Churchill Road down here, that's what's in the current agreement. We built this extension here to where we thought the railroad track was going to be, and then we built Secretariat Street, which gives access to this undeveloped area in Conway, okay? That was the original vision. Those decisions were based on the best information the village and the school district had at the time. We rolled them into the agreement. The plan was that really when the village called for those to be built, and it would be our job as a developer to build those roads and to pay for those roads, okay? Any questions on that version and what we were doing there? Okay, let's switch to another slide, Trent. What was proposed at the joint meeting several weeks ago is an updated plan where Churchill comes down. Instead of crossing down here at Secretariat, South Mahomet Road goes through. The railroad crossing is actually moved over to here. Okay? The cost of the roads, at least on our property, is a little less under that plan. And the proposal is for the cost of that to be funded not by the school district directly, but through a extension of the existing TIF, in which we would forego some TIF revenue for a longer period of time, as with the other taxing bodies and the road. And not only does our section of the road, but the whole project then, all the way to Prairie View Road, all the way across the railroad tracks, and the new crossing gets funded out of TIF, okay? That is the proposal. You've got several sheets relating to the TIF. There's a Q&A sheet, and we want to thank our friends at the village for helping us today to put some answers to some of those questions. And then we've got, an extension sheet on the TIF where it shows the monies the TIF raised through 2019 and the effect that's had on the district, so we asked that question too. If we'd like to, I'd propose we take just a minute or two. If you've not had a chance to read through the Q&A piece, we might want to individually scan that real quick to make sure we kind of know what the answers are to those questions. And I think we're open for questions and discussion on the TIF. See, our mayor has joined us in the meantime. Thank you for being here. The village delegation had a meeting earlier tonight, so they did double duty tonight. We appreciate them attending the meeting and then being here.
So the breakdown here shows developers with about $4.3 million worth of cost here. I don't know who would pay for the crossing, who pays for the crossing change? Is that the village that pays for that?
Wasn't that in the original
this-
TIF?
Coming out of current.
The current TIF.
In the current TIF, I think the village paid for the crossing. Under this plan, the TIF extension pays for the crossing. Part of the problem with the original agreement,
It's
besides.
not the TIF extension that pays for the railroad crossing.
Oh,
It is all added, I mean, the 7 million, it's all part of the balance.
okay.
It's just pretending like it continues on, so 7 million is still, you know, based on the estimate of the conservative estimates. It's in that 7 million. The railroad crossing for 1.5 is in that 7 million.
Yeah, a couple things have changed from the original intergovernmental agreement. One thing is where we think the roads should be has changed. The other piece that the first agreement didn't address really was how to raise the money to pay for it. Which the village would pay for the crossing, the school district would pay for the roads. Well, that would require us to bond or something to build the roads. And it could happen on very short notice under the ground rules of the current intergovernmental agreement. So one of the thoughts in this proposal was the TIF gives us everyone a funding mechanism to get that done without either the village or the district.
But it looks to me like then the developers will not be contributing anything to this. It'll be funded solely by the taxing bodies listed here if it's through the TIF?
TIF revenue, I mean, just to explain TIF revenue, all TIF revenue has to be spent on public infrastructure.
Right.
So it has to be spent on water, sewer lines, road projects. I mean, that kind of summarizes most of public infrastructure. But, I mean, there are other things you can spend money on, you know, tear downs. You can't spend money on buildings really, but, so the money has to be invested, and those are all eligible costs in the TIF district.
The strategy behind TIF is you take the money the TIF generates, you spend it on infrastructure in the TIF, and then that helps develop and expand the TIF. And in theory, in TIF theory, long term, there's a payback because you develop that area and development happens, it then creates more taxes, and you come out of the TIF. At the end of the TIF, you come out dollars.
But if that's the TIF, what is gonna go in commercially or residentially that's going to fund that part of the recoupment of the costs? Because it looks like we're depending on developers on both sides to actually put something there that would generate income. So I'm not sure where the TIF part will kick in unless we know that there are plans to develop that. And then if there are plans to develop that, correct me if I'm wrong, the developer would be responsible for putting their portion of the road in at the time that they develop that, correct?
I mean, is the Atkins Group or Purnell planning on developing this land or leaving it as farmland?
I would venture to say that we have talked to Atkins Group before. We've also talked to the other investor to the north, and they always have long-term plans, but it all depends on, you know, what's developable, what's happening at the time. So they did not buy that land just to farm it, I can say that, but.
I
And
would
just to clarify too, as far as the projections are based on the current increment forecasting that up, so we're not dependent on anything to happen. It's based on our current increment, continue to grow how it's growing now.
We're growing at a 2% growth.
I would also
Isn't
add,
the point of a TIF to spend money to encourage growth?
Yes,
I
that's
mean,
right.
that's what, during the village meeting, Roger Jackson pointed out to us that this wouldn't even qualify for a TIF if we were to have a new one. Right, because this isn't going to, the point of a TIF is to spur on either blighted development or development that wouldn't happen without.
You were still receiving TIF funds from every house that is in that phase.
something else I'll throw out. Developing all the way through Prairie View Road, in theory, that will spur some development. In reality, in the meantime, while we're spurring development, we've opened up the south part of Mahomet. They can get north to 150, and by putting that all the way through to Prairie View Road, gives them an option rather than coming up Churchill Road and going through a roundabout. And I think that's an important thing for us to consider, is if that leg was not built, the only way out of South Champaign would be to cross the tracks and come down around our property through the roundabout. I think putting that in initially with the whole package diverts a lot of folks that just want to go towards Champaign or towards 74 to be able to get out without going through the roundabout. So there is some benefit to us.
So is that
Now,
developer
is it $3
with,
million worth of benefit? I don't know, but there's benefit.
is the developer with the $1.3 million going to put that road in?
We would propose the TIF funds are used to put all the roads in. That way it's all done at once and you have that connection to Prairie Road.
But we only need this connection when we build onto that property more, correct? So if we don't build a
Two
junior
things that-
high for 20 years, I'm just spitballing, if we don't build anything on that plot of land for 20 years, we are under no obligation to put that road in until development.
Yeah, we are under the current agreement, we are.
I mean, here's the problem. The problem is the TIF funds that we have right now, or that we project, we have to have that money spent in I don't know what the exact time is, but we have to have that money committed, which it is committed, and it has to be spent when that TIF expires. I don't know if it has to be spent exactly in the year 2024 when we get our last funds, but we can't sit on the TIF money. We have to spend it. So the village in turn is going to have to build that crossing at the latest 2024, around that time frame. We have to build the crossing because we have to spend the TIF money. We have to.
But you could build the crossing to nowhere, so
No,
to
you
speak.
cannot. You cannot
No?
build it to nowhere. No.
You can't build it
When
to
the crossing
nowhere.
is given, you're gonna have a set time frame to make connections. 3 years to make connections. So it's gonna have to connect to the school. So we would in turn the school would have to build their connection. And then the developer in the middle, there's nothing to force that developer to build that property if they don't, because they're not doing a development yet. The benefit of still having the school do what they have and the village done what we have, which we're gonna have to do if we want the crossing, is that you have a gap basically there. So we would then in turn have to try to go out and try to apply for different grant fundings to try to fund that gap. But the connection's gonna have to be made within a certain set period of time.
So what you're telling me is that the village intends to make the school build the road as soon as you do the crossing, even if it's just our section of the road and the developer doesn't do the in-between.
Yes.
But I thought you just said you're not gonna do the crossing if it's a crossing to nowhere.
No, we have to we have to spend the TIF funds. So the crossing's gonna have to be done at the close of the TIF.
So,
So why
but,
would we be obligated to build it and not the developer?
We're not obligated, the developer is not, that's a property owner, there's no obligation on that property. It's undeveloped land. The school district has developed the property that you're sitting on, and that makes it a subdivision and a development, and with the subject to the terms of the development agreement. So if somebody came in and bought the undeveloped land between the two, then it is very well possible that developer could come in there and say, I want to build a subdivision. I and I just be very cautious how I say this, you know, I can say that anyone that is looking at that land sees a very poor return on investment in terms of the ability to, I'm being very careful, it's very difficult to get your return on investment because of the high development cost of that piece. That piece is very unique and very different than a lot of things. Number one, the water and sewer is up there. See where the crossing, $1.5 million? That's where the water and sewer comes from. So to develop that piece of land, you're gonna have to spend all of your infrastructure on phase one. Nobody makes money on phase one. Nobody usually makes money on phase two. So you're gonna have to put almost all of your infrastructure would be upfront in phase one if you were going to develop that land. That's, I'll just say, very cost prohibitive and very unappealing. I'll just leave it at that. I mean, because
So I feel like we got, I wanna make sure I understand. The crossing, the 1.5 million, is that already scheduled to be paid for with the current TIF?
that's, yes, the current TIF.
And that's gonna happen regardless of whether or not we extend?
It has to, because we have to spend our TIF money at the conclusion of the TIF. I mean, we might have a year or two, but we have to
I'll
spend it.
clarify it. There is a do nothing option, and we talked about that at our joint meeting.
What happens?
The only thing we've expended so far is the design, engineering, and some legal for that crossing.
What happens to the TIF funds if nothing happens?
If we don't spend TIF funds and it expires, I believe it goes back to all the taxing bodies.
But we have other, we have other areas that would benefit from economic development and growth. So we would spend the money somewhere else in the TIF district on public infrastructure.
That's not in the TIF district.
No, it has to be in the TIF district.
Okay,
So-
so have you ever looked at any other plan than this one? Cause, I mean, I said this at the joint meeting, but this road through the middle is really problematic to me. It stops us from being able to do things and brings a major road right past our schools.
I would.
It seems to me that maybe there's some other.
This is the least expensive option for all parties. And that 1.5 million, if that crossing wasn't there, and I'm not saying that's why the crossing's there, because there was a plan years ago for a crossing to be there and a crossing to be where Max showed before. But we know there's zero chance of getting two crossings. So we went with the crossing area that was least expensive to be, and that we viewed that could be access to not just the school site, as Max pointed out, access all the way to Prairie View Road with easier traffic going to get onto the interchange there. So this was the best, quickest option that could get this road built when it really needs to be built.
Under
No sooner
all
rather than-
options, there's a road going across somewhere. This divides it into approximately equal sections, and I think gives us usable space on both the north and the south. If you move that road all the way south along the railroad tracks, you will have more expense in building the road. You'll still have a road across the property. You'll leave a spot on the south that's probably not usable for much. And on the north side, you still have to, you probably have to build more access roads, so.
The crossing right now is.
I get that, because I had concerns about that, and I think it's.
I was gonna say the crossing now is TIF eligible. The crossing over there on the original drawing that Max
It
showed
was not TIF eligible.
is not TIF eligible.
Why is that?
It's not in the TIF district.
It's not in the district.
Well, a little, the stuff on this side would be, but,
The south of
Yeah.
the railroad is not in the TIF, the area is in there.
the Methodist church area is actually in the TIF, right where the Methodist
What would
church.
stop you from just going straight with that road?
I'll let the engineer cover that one.
As far as the crossing on the tracks,
Just, South Mahomet Road, and that seems like that'd be even a cheaper road to build. It's the closest point to two lines.
probably similar in cost, but from a safety perspective, crossing at a skew angle is probably not gonna be preferred or allowed by the railroad.
So you're right now looking.
You want a more of a
You
90.
wanna
90
come in.
Not like Rising Road, yeah.
Yeah, the way that
was as they were
I
going.
guess it almost looks like an S curve, but the way that approach is and the distances that you can't see because it doesn't show the distances, that is a design that would be approved. The way those
And you're a
angles are.
90-degree crossing of the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
Or if you just go across straight, you're not at 90 degrees.
How much is left in the current TIF? I see 1.5 is allocated. Is there anything else left in the current TIF?
I believe projections right now, and again, each year it could be higher than the 2%, but I think we explained last meeting, for us to go out and get a bond, the 2% growth is, well, that's, we can't show higher. We have to base it on the more conservative number. I believe somewhere around 1.7, maybe where it's projecting today. 1.7 million.
So back when there was a renegotiation of the TIF in 2008 and 2009, there was a lot of concern about the fact that the school district is giving a lot of money, more money than what it would cost to fund the road. So the school district is actually losing money on this deal in terms of the road versus the money. And that'd be great if we had a lot of money, but we don't. Right, we're always needing more money, and so I have a concern that, you know, if there's $8 or $9 million in the TIF over those next 12 years, if we're roughly 56% of the contributor, then we're contributing a lot more than $1.8 million. And I just don't know that we have the extra money to not do the things we need to do, especially with the influx of students that we have coming in. And that to me is a concern, and I know it was a big concern a decade ago as well.
I think we calculated this out. Again, this is the conservative estimate. If it's bigger, it means your pass-throughs are bigger. So the gap here, the gap in the difference. I think your difference here, without using a calculator, I think the differences are in that. In the end, based on what does it cost the school district to go out and bond today, right now, 1.8 million. Well, I'll tell you, when you go out and bond it, it's going to be probably 2 million plus interest. What's it going to cost the school to pay for their obligations versus what you're giving up with the TIF extension over the life of the 13 more years or 12 more years? That number is somewhere around 750,000. So that's your difference.
Yeah, and don't lose sight too is the village does not have that amount of money to allocate to this project. So not only is it a money situation here, it's a timing thing too. So if the TIF, and I said this at our joint meeting, if the TIF extension doesn't happen, this road doesn't happen. And that would be unfortunate for, I think, everybody involved. Not only the taxing bodies, but, you know, Mahomet residents as well. So it's kind of when we looked at the extension, this was a win-win for everybody involved. Money aside.
We remain at 100% flow through in residential, correct?
Terms do not change with the extension.
Right. So residential money still flows through.
And again, you made some points about the purpose of TIF in the first place.
Right.
That still sits. With the TIF extension, you know, we're going to continue to make every effort we can. We've invested, and there's some numbers that we can give for one of the questions on expenditures, but we've made every effort. We've gone out, we've made lots of public infrastructure improvements, 150 and Prairie View Road. There's been a lot of interest, but at the same time, there are people that don't pull the trigger for whatever reason. That's up to them. But we firmly believe if there's a TIF extension that we're going to continue to see growth in the TIF district, more entities, more commercial growth happening as well, which in the end, the school district will benefit from that and make up that $800,000 or $700,000, $800,000 gap, because that's the gap. You're gonna make that up with growth over those 13 years. I can tell you that right now. You'll make that up.
Well, there's stuff that's being built out here right now that has been built in recent years that probably would not have happened. At least to the extent it has, if it wasn't for the TIF. Now, you know, everybody in the room has different feelings on how much they like all those things that are being built. But those buildings that are being built pay property taxes. So the financial model part of it works.
I agree with Patrick that the benefit from the commercial development is likely to be far more than our contribution. I think our mere presence here helps with commercial developers saying yes. I think the TIF funds that actually help them build out their Loan 150 sweeten the pot.
I mean, development costs are a lot. I know everyone probably thinks a developer makes a lot of money, but I'm here to tell you that it's easier certainly if you, no offense Max, but if you have other businesses like you're a realtor that you can sell homes as well. But most developers are not making money, you know, on the development. The return on investment takes years to come up and make up that difference. And I've talked about some difficulties in what we're looking at right now. I can say too that we've had at least two entities interested in that corner at the end where Prairie View Road butts up against that proposed South Mama Road extension. Neither one of them pulled the trigger because of the cost prohibitive nature of what's happening there. So yeah, there are benefits of that development or that section there being done as part of using TIF funds on that section as well, because it's very expensive. The owners say to the South Atkins group, they're not gonna say, yeah, we'll go build the road for one entity. Then you need like a few things wanting to come there for that to happen. If the road was there and that infrastructure was done, I could see that over those 13 years, a lot more things happening there that will generate significant revenue for the school district.
But isn't that, it's zoned right now residential, correct? R1A?
I think there was, when the TIF district, there was default zoning put in certain things, and that's kind of more of a default zoning. So if somebody wants to come in and wants that to be rezoned commercial, that would be a logical section for commercial.
So are the entities you're talking about, were those residential or commercial entities?
One was commercial profit, I'll say that, one was nonprofit, that would not generate revenue, but the other one would have generated revenue, commercial.
Safe to assume, much like as you approach 150, there's probably going to be property rezoned commercial along the artery, potentially.
Yeah, typically.
And then residential behind that.
And even though some of it's zoned residential that is adjacent to 150 in that undeveloped section between McDonald's and you know, around the Hill area, that naturally would be rezoned commercial because your properties closest to the highway are going to be more mixed use type developments.
So does that mean that we should expect the same kind of traffic on that road that we see on 150 then? Because that's, I mean, if that's gonna cut smack through the center of the school, that's a lot of traffic, that's high volume traffic, and I think that's really, I've got some concerns about how that limits what we build and access students have and where buildings are gonna go and.
It's too hard for me to sit here and project what that means, but I would say during certain hours, the majority of that traffic you're talking about are going to the school. In the school, to begin with.
And if we had buildings
significant
there,
amount of
we'd have
traffic.
school zone speed limits.
Yeah, there'd be school zone speed limits, but yeah, it's true. I mean, I think people that live on the south side of town, that's the purpose of that road too, is to get them quicker to relieve the pressure on 150. It's not gonna be the same amount of traffic. It's gonna be, you're gonna have that mix of relief on 150 of what traffic volumes you see now, which are actually fine. I know we are not used to saying that. I know we think it's a much busier, but in terms of traffic volume, it's for Mahomet, but it doesn't warrant 4 lanes, let's put it that way.
It's
not
probably
anything
principally residential
Yeah.
traffic. There's
Yeah.
probably not gonna be a lot of commercial traffic.
Yeah, you're gonna get more traffic, there's no question on South Palm Road, but the road will be built wide, oversized for that purpose, to handle that traffic.
Does the village have an objection if the district really wants to go with something like this, the original plat? Even if it's gonna cost a little money to basically move that road down and not have it cross our land?
That creates, yeah, I think we would have an objection at this point, because that creates a whole nother, I'd say, can of worms from a standpoint of where the blue dot is, we don't own that land, we don't, that's a farmland that.
No, I mean like what's on the original plat.
Original plat it was Country
Had
Ridge,
to cross.
Country Ridge Drive coming all the way
But I
down.
mean, even if it would just come down lower, have the road cross where you're having
Bring
it
the road
cross,
down here
and
more.
then run it down along the railroad track. Because then it doesn't
Isn't-
cross our building, or,
Doesn't this transect the division of the properties?
This
So
is-
it transect the property owners are
Correct, so
different.
to the north and
Goes
south.
along the property line. I don't know if that's part of it, but that's.
That was part of the reason why that point was picked, to try to minimize the cost for everybody involved, but also try to get a logical point of intersection at Churchill Road and South Mahomet, because to the east there, you have one property owner to the north and one to the south.
So does that South Mahomet extension also include water and sewer?
Yes. Yes,
I think the numbers have utilities
I
in
think
there.
it has utilities.
Yeah, so
All right, concrete, water, and sewer. So it seems to me that lessens our cost of further development, north and south of that street equally.
Yeah, the only
Because
addition,
of the
yeah.
because of the water and sewer.
And we addressed this at the joint meeting, the additional cost to the school district, that's not part of that the TIF district would pay, but the additional cost to the school district, when warranted down there near, close to the tracks, there would be the East Mahomet sewer extension that would still have to, because of depth and because of ability to serve everything to the south, the sewer, there would still be an additional sewer, the large capacity east interceptor sewer would still be built when you do develop to the south of that road, near along the tracks. There would be another sewer that would still have to be installed.
Even if the road is here.
Yes, yes, because the interceptor sewer has to be the south end of the properties along the railroad tracks to serve its purpose of serving the largest amount.
And we're responsible for putting those utilities in because we're the developer here?
Yes. Right.
but I'm gonna go back to Megan's question too. If we don't build a building, then we don't need that road through the middle of our property to build that.
You mean build a building ever?
I mean, until we build the building, let's say, if we're going to build a building there.
Well, I don't know about you, but we're getting complaints all the time about traffic on 150 and traffic going through Conway Farms and traffic going through everything else, and that traffic is, sole purpose of that traffic is to get to the two schools that are there now. So I think we've heard it loud and clear from the public that there is a traffic concern and people wanting a better way to get to the school. And that has always been the plan, to get to the school. That was the plan before the school was even there too, to have a road connection. But
What about the possibility of, I think I brought this up in the joint meeting, of doing the part of Churchill Road and then doing just the eastern leg of the South Mahomet Road. And then you'd have that 3.6 million. And then utilize the crossing at the south end of Prairie View for people living in the southwest corner.
I don't think I'm all
Which
that.
it down.
So,
Yeah, but you have to go a mile south before you can get.
is it
down
that
to
far?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess part of the problem for me too is that in a normal time in a school district, the idea of forward, short-term loss for long-term growth is a valid thought, right, to think about. I feel at this juncture, we have, every single school is too small for our needs. And we have to do all of that additional growth, and so I just don't feel like we can even give up any short-term money right now. Because in the short term, we have to spend the money to solve these problems, and they're substantial problems that we have to solve that are not cheap in any way. And so it's hard for me to think about giving up money short-term for long-term gain while we have such a short-term need. If it was, schools were built and we're, another school district that's okay, I could see maybe having that discussion. It's really hard to think about giving all that
Are
money
you
out.
suggesting build the junior high and feed all the traffic through our existing roads from the north?
No, I think what she's saying, and what's striking a chord for me too, is with the TIF in place, and if we extend it, we're currently missing out on about 200,000 in tax revenue, and we could use that money to lower our class sizes.
But
That
we need a road to feed the junior high.
Well, I'm saying we need a junior high or another school or an addition on every school we have,
Yeah, and if
right?
we lower our class sizes, we have to have more classes that we don't have room for presently.
Right, but even if we don't redirect this money, to which I believe heavily that class size is a huge issue, but our high school's too small, Lincoln Trail's too small, this building is too small, the junior high is too small. Like, we have a lot of need to do something about space, and we can't wait another 16 years to do that. We have to do it really soon.
As part of this agreement, do we have the flexibility to say, once we hit our $1.8 million responsibility under this TIF, we start to pass through the rest of that money that we would have been given up to the TIF? Or can we not do that? Because it feels to me like we're subsidizing the rest of these roads for the developers. And that's the only way, am I mischaracterizing this? The only way to get this road actually built is to do it with the TIF money, because there's nothing that can compel these developers to do that. And you're gonna spend the TIF money, you can compel us to do that because we have a piece of land that has development on it. But the only way to make this road work is for us to subsidize for the rest of the developers. Is that correct?
I think it's a fair statement. I mean, with or without the school being a player in this would still be a long-term, long-range transportation plan or goal, and TIF would be our target to fund it. And the idea of saying that we're relieving the developers of something, well, you can have that stance too, but that same token, the flip side of that coin is, if it was so inviting, it would be built now. And the reality is it's not. So that is the essence of TIF and trying to economic development is you have to make that initial infrastructure cost investment, and that in return enables them to make their investment on their side. So that's where we're at. So I think, with or without the school, this corridor has been identified as that a logical extension and try and relieve, the southern side of Mahomet as far as traffic.
I mean, I guess I understand from Mahomet as a whole, but as a school district, every dollar we give up for a road is dollar that doesn't go to kids. And so now that we're developers, I kind of feel like maybe we're out of our core competency here. And so my question is there any way to structure this deal so that once we pay for what we are responsible for the road through this TIF, the rest of that money continues to pass through to the school? Or is that negates our ability to do this entirely?
Well, the residential will, and if you're looking at this as a cash in and cash return game, personal philosophies on development put aside, okay, if you're just looking at money invested and money return, you put that road in, okay, it's gonna spur some commercial, it's probably also gonna spur some residential, and that residential money flows back to us 100%. So I think there's the opportunity to gain, just again, if you're looking at the cash machine part of this, there's the opportunity to gain a lot of money back on the residential part of the development that
So on
we
the-
won't have
on
if
the
we
right-
don't invest in them.
On the right side, guys, where there's development, let's say you put 100 homes, residential homes that have a tax bill of $10,000 in the TIF district. if you extend this TIF for, that's $1 million a year with 100% flow through. Your project right now is estimated at $7 million. If you have 100 homes go in there with 100% pass through, that's $13 million on a 13-year extension.
But that's also 100 homes full of kids that then burden the school. We can't just think of it as a developer, because we then have an influx of kids and an infrastructure that we're responsible as the school district that we already don't have capacity in each of our buildings. So we can't just look at this as, you know, as a developer would. We have to still perform our core competency of making sure the schools are big enough. And once you start building, you have to be able to house those kids. So.
Again, like I said, personal development strategies and preferences aside, the cash part of that works, so you're gonna generate more cash. And yeah, are we gonna spend that cash to educate kids? Sure we are, that's what we do. And there will be more kids to educate. There will be more kids to educate, I think, over the next few years, regardless.
Yeah, I mean,
There was the question posed in the spring, it was by Jenny Park, about how, is there a point of time when building another house hurts us rather than helps us? And the answer given was every house, in terms of money, right? That we don't collect as much as it costs to educate kids. And so, it doesn't mean we don't want to educate the kids, but it's just, building more houses doesn't increase the cash position of the district. Net, we lose on that. I mean, that was the answer given that spring, so.
All you're looking is the income from the house, you get the income from the kids from the state also. So we come out, we get paid for the kids if there's houses, because the state makes their proportion as well.
And it takes into account our local capacity and things that means.
Yeah.
the houses being built in Mahomet are a lot more expensive than most of the surrounding communities. So I mean, what the district receives in tax revenue from property taxes is, I don't know what the numbers are, but it's quite a bit different than what Champaign receives.
I think the downside for us would be an apartment dwelling that's full of kids and doesn't have the tax rate that 100 homes would have.
I agree.
That's the downside.
But we
And-
have
and-
no control over what people put there. We don't
Yeah,
own that
well, we
land.
do.
We do?
We've got a lot of control, because if we help make this road and incentivize the development of that north $3 million property, that changes the game.
But we can't tell that developer, we want you to put
can't-
homes versus apartments in.
No, we wouldn't. But if we have a road, that attracts developers of different flavors. And increases the opportunities for commercial between that and 150.
But we
If
have
there's no-
commercial right now sitting empty.
We're looking forward for 13 years.
So a contingency that we haven't talked about here, and it's something that when the village and the board met previously, they hired a demographer to project growth and so on. And one of the things that was interesting about what he had to say was he was predicting a recession. And if we commit to this money and build this project and a recession happens and developers say, we're waiting 5-10 years, then this is all for nothing.
No, so let's go back to the other premise of the junior high. We're a non-starter if we don't have a road in building a junior high on this property. We cannot do it. We can't feed that junior high traffic all from the north.
I have concerns that building a junior high here isn't the actual solution we need to be looking at.
Where are we gonna do it?
I'm not sure, but we have a shortage in every single one of our buildings. So a new junior high, we can build a new junior high and we still don't have enough space in this building. We don't still have enough space in Lincoln Trail. We don't have enough space in our high school. So I think we have to start looking at how we are projecting our growth in terms of not a building, but as a whole.
You know, we're making.
We've got enough land to build more than one building.
Well, I don't understand where
We're making a summary comment, so we don't have space, we don't have space, we don't have space. We don't have as much space as we would like, and we've got some buildings that are tighter than others. I think we need to be careful. We've got space options at the high school.
We do.
We've got space options in this building,
We have no space options at the junior high.
no space options at the junior high.
High school and Lincoln Trail are also not landlocked. That was the point of looking at the junior high from the start, was the junior
Right.
high is
Right.
landlocked.
I mean, I still, again, I'll make the same thing, and I go back to the gap, I'm actually trying to make this point as well. In that 13 years, that gap, the way the gap sits at the estimate, is you're talking $700,000 to $800,000. So are you gonna see economic growth in that TIF district during a 13-year extension, or 12-year extension, sorry, that generates 700 or 800,000, or even a fraction of that, that narrows that gap that you're worried about? And I would not guarantee it, but I would say it's very well likely. So if the projections come in more than 2%, which they very well will, remember, you're getting more money. The gap is still, would follow the same trajectory, and the gap would be very similar to that. There's other areas the village can invest. I mean, we have an entity right now is looking for land and looking for something to happen, but unfortunately, the development is cost prohibitive for it to happen. I mean, they would be here in the next year if they could, but the development's cost prohibitive. And those are the type of things that a TIF district can the village incentivize that or help that happen to then in turn generate tax revenue for all of us on the property tax side? And the answer is yes. So we have every intention, all the money we get from TIF district is gonna be invested in TIF district, all of it. And again, I shouldn't say this, but on residential growth, we don't control I know you think we do, but we don't control residential growth. Residential growth has happened in Mahomet because your school district is a good school district that everybody, I don't know how many of you have moved here in the last 10 years, probably a lot of you. That's why. And the downside, I don't think you want the downside. I don't think you want no growth in housing. If you have no growth in housing and people wanting to move here, then you have other problems.
Right, but I totally agree with you. People move here because the schools are wonderful. But they would move here with or without a TIF, right? I mean, people are trying to move here, so.
Maybe. I mean, there's several other competing school districts around here too that are starting to draw off some of those numbers. Monticello's one, Unity's one. Those are all, and St. Joe are all very attractive school districts.
But there's no shortage of residential
We
development
have tons
happening
of
already.
residential opportunity. I mean, my subdivision has 3 phases left to go. They're starting a new subdivision behind me. There's one south of Country Ridge, Hunter's Ridge. I mean, it's not that people come here and they say, wow, there's no place I can move or build a house.
And another
No, we've
thing,
got
May not be the price range.
another thing that the demographer pointed out is for the first time in US history, we're gonna have more people trying to sell their homes than buy. So we're gonna have a lot of boomers retiring and leaving, trying to sell their homes. I don't think we're in any jeopardy of not having space for people wanting to move from
We
Mahomet.
used to be a community where you retired and then you sold and you moved somewhere else. And then, and there are still people that do that, you know, we all know that. But the trend has shifted. And there's more and more people I see that are my age that have kids out of school. And they've got friendships and they're established here. And they're staying here for a couple reasons. They've got established relationships here. There used to be a major property tax differential between Mahomet and the rest of the county. You could move back into Champaign or Urbana and pay lower property taxes. That's not the case now. And so that trend has, for the village, has shifted.
Max, I would add that
Plus of
the
that.
quality of life to stay here is better because of the commercial development that we had in the past 10 years.
That's true. You do a lot of things here in town now you could have done.
Correct.
I can get a Jimmy John's here.
So it's great.
I've
to
been
have a
told for
Jimmy-
years I was gonna be able to do that, now I finally can.
It's totally great to have a Jimmy John's, but from a school perspective, we get no additional revenue, tax money from a Jimmy John's moving to town.
Okay, sure we do.
What?
Sure we do.
They're a commercial building, they're paying taxes.
Yeah.
Well, aren't they in the TIF district?
No,
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 Jimmy
Not
Johnson.
this TIF district, the commercial core TIF district?
no.
There's only
Are
one
they in the
district
commercial
That's
down.
not 150.
No, there's a downtown too.
Well,
There's a
down-
downtown TIF district that just got passed this past year, right? That includes
I
all of
think 47
Lombard,
North was on it.
all of,
Are they in the downtown too or not?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
alright, well then,
and
how long
there's
does
no
that run?
pass-through on that TIF,
How long does that run?
23 years.
Alright,
Would they have been over there if it wasn't there?
so it's a savings bond. We'll see tax.
Careful of that.
But I mean, we have
Probably
kids,
it's
we have
probably
kids in school now who are gonna grow up, get married, have kids. Their kids are gonna start kindergarten and graduate high school before we see a dime of money from anything in that corridor. So that's another thing too, to have that whole corridor, we get no taxes. And people say to me all the time, why would we want commercial growth? Well, as a school district, we want commercial growth. That's a great way for us to diversify our tax base, except not anymore because the whole commercial core is in a TIF.
Right, but it generates
And now this is gonna be,
It generates payroll, that money gets spent in town,
Sales taxes.
generates sales tax.
It funds other community enhancements, i.e. downtown master plan, which has been improved. I mean, those sort of things are gonna happen because of that TIF. Without that TIF,
And it's still money, and that tip money will be spent in the community.
I mean, I think
but
that.
how did that TIF get passed without the school district even knowing there was a TIF? Doesn't the school district have to approve?
We knew, and our delegates were at that meeting.
TIFs are passed in public open meetings. This occurred in January.
Did the board weigh in on that, Tiff? But when did that happen, before or after April,
It was in January.
January? Does the
I mean,
Board of
Merle
Education?
didn't even know there was a TIF, right? So,
Not there.
No?
so
I have to go back and look.
I thought we just, I
Okay.
don't remember 150.
I'd like to go back and just address some of the comments about the high school being out of space. These are comments that I made at the joint meeting on September 4th. And the utilization of space is something that maybe the board would want to explore in our buildings. And so that's kind of a separate conversation. But currently at the junior high and the high school, so putting aside Middletown, Prairie, and Lincoln Trail, the teachers all have plan times in which their classrooms are open and not being taught in. And so it is possible to, especially at the high school, to utilize those open classrooms, because that's currently not going on. And so what that looks like is teachers who travel around the building. It's not ideal. They don't have their own classroom, but they go to the classrooms that are open throughout the day.
Almost college campus.
Sure, yeah, so, the big difference between, so that could happen at the junior high as well. The big difference between the junior high and the high school, though, is that at the junior high, the core areas are also, getting to the point where they can't support the number of students who are currently at the junior high. So by core areas, I mean the cafeteria, the gymnasiums, the library, and the hallways. That's different at the high school. There's quite a bit more core space, and in fact, the library was just expanded 3.5 years ago. Obviously, there's the gym in the field house, the main commons, very large. So I just want to, I don't think it's quite accurate to say that the high school is out of space. There's a, capacity can be looked at in a lot of different ways, and so the company that did our demographic study also does capacity utilization studies of buildings. So just putting that out there, that would be a decision that the board, if you wanted to engage in that. So there's, becomes more of a scheduling issue in terms of where teachers teach. Right? There are classrooms available, in particular at the high school, but again, it's the core space that is of concern.
But it seems like the trend is we have our biggest kindergarten class ever, right? And and next year we'll probably have a little bit bigger kindergarten class. So and we don't have people, it seems like, moving out, they're moving in, which is great, but those core classes just get added onto and will be moving up the building. So it's not hard to see the problem that we've got the biggest classes starting to move on to each building, and then that will impact the use of each of those buildings and the space required to house all of those kids. This is not a problem that seems to be getting smaller. It's not like we're having smaller classes. So when we look about planning and how we're gonna spend our money, I think it's safe to say that we have, I think that we're using the cafeteria here now to teach a class because we don't have classrooms. Is that correct?
It's more due to what's being taught in that class. That space in the cafeteria is just more conducive to the content of that class.
Just kind of, again, public spaces, right? And as we're looking about growth and things like that, Lincoln Trail, it seems to me like we heard last meeting or the meeting before that some closets that were bigger have been turned into use of classrooms. I don't think it's a stretch to say that we're kind of pushing the maximum on each of these buildings. So what I have a fear of doing here is being tunnel visioned and saying just because the junior high is the one that is the most compressed right now, it seems short-sighted to me to not say if we have a general space issue in all of our buildings and it's just a matter of how much flex we have, should we be looking at growth in a global fashion so that when we make decisions on how we spend resources, we make decisions that promote the most growth opportunity. And so I feel like we're really tunnel visioned on the junior high, but I have some real concern that we have some other ideas that we're not considering, like maybe we build a new high school and we build it with a bigger capacity and the junior high moves to the high school and we funnel 5 and 6 into the junior high. I mean, there are things that we are limiting ourselves in terms of opportunities if we just say the junior high has to be our next step. And I don't think the junior high actually solves the more global problem of what do we do about space in general in the district.
The comment was made that the high school is out of space now, and I just wanted to clarify that you are exactly right in terms of the classes that are coming up, but we're not out of space right now at the high school. The junior high.
We also do have land that, which to expand both at Lincoln Trail and at the high school, which we don't have for the junior high. The junior high is the weak link in the bottleneck in all our future plans.
Right, but
Because we got a capability to expand those other 2 footprints.
if we built the junior high, we would still have to expand the high school and expand Lincoln Trail and expand this building.
That's just a matter of when. So yes, we
But I
likely
mean,
will.
we've already heard that this building needs to be expanded in the next 5 years, right? And so this just got built. But if you were, say, just as an example, to build the high school, then you can,
Sorry, what was that?
When did we hear this would needs to expand in the next 5 years?
Rick Johnston sent an email, his final email said that your 5-year plan
your 5-year plan should
should
include an
extension on this building.
of this building because you're out of space. But I guess what I'm saying is, and I'm not saying this is what we have to do, lots of people from the community are suggesting lots of different things, but if you built a high school and then you moved the junior high to the high school and then sort of put people around, one building could solve all the space problems in the whole district.
The cost of a high school would be double that of a junior high. Could be 40 million instead of 20 million, or 30 instead of 15.
I'm just saying, why, we need to look at
We have thought through some of these things. Those are the ramifications.
The high school has
dollars are way higher.
So it seems like the junior high is the decision that was made?
Junior high was the target because we did review all the other schools.
But what I'm saying is, shouldn't we be looking at,
But we can again. We've done this for our 10 years past is, well, we looked at this and looked at this and looked at this. It's why we bought this property.
because I think if we look at a junior high plus expanding all the other buildings, you're gonna creep towards the same amount of cost. So again, I think when we have to talk about what is our space problem, it behooves us to look globally at the space issue and not single vision one building as the answer if we have opportunities other places.
You guys, will we move on to the junior high part of the discussion? Is that where we're at?
Oh, I don't know, I'm sorry, I just asked a question about.
I'm just,
I think one goal of the community engagement process was to get feedback from our community on these exact ideas and just see what was out there in terms of facilities and facilities plans.
I think if the community was up to the price tag of doing a new high school, I think we'd be foolish not to consider that. My guess is, when we see the price tag on a high school, to do a junior high, and if we need to do additions elsewhere, my guess is, and we can and probably should run the math so we know this, my guess is that the price tag will be lower than if by building a high school, because high schools are just way high. And to make the high school bigger now, we'd be building this educational space, we wouldn't need core space. And then the other problem, or the other opportunity, is that gives us a way to spread the cost out. If you did a junior high and then you did some other additions as you needed them, or if you did a new high school, not only do I believe we'll see the price tag be higher, that's money we'd have to come up with all at once. Now, are those options we can look at and consider? Absolutely. Are we gonna listen to the community? Absolutely. But I think just from some of the past planning that's been done, that's kind of what we've seen.
But in the past planning, did you anticipate having to build onto this building in 5 years? Within 5 years?
We always knew there was a possibility we'd have to build onto this building. That's why that was included in the design.
Are we gonna have some actual?
I mean, here's, and let me talk about that for a minute. Okay, I mean, there's two strategies. You build slightly larger than you need with expandability, or you build it all bigger now. Well, again, it's cash outlay and timing. It's also, what's the need really gonna be? You know, we think we know what the need's gonna be 5 years from now, but we don't know for sure. So the strategy has been to be a little conservative on the cash outlay, build slightly bigger than we needed, and plan for expandability. That was the plan. That's what happened. Now, just should we have built it a little bigger than we did? We can talk about that for a long time, but the fact is, we looked at the cost, we looked at the benefit, we looked at the timing on the money, and that's the approach we decided to take. That's really what we've always done in Mahomet, because of the fact that we've seen rapid growth we've not seen rapid, that's the misnomer. We've seen consistent growth over the years, okay? And quite frankly, I mean, we're talking right now, we don't have money, we don't have money, we don't have money. 15 years ago, we didn't have any money, okay? And the financial crisis 15 years, financially, I mean, this is a land of plenty compared to 15 years ago, okay? I'm just gonna tell you.
Compared to 10, it was how many?
Yeah, compared to 10, this is a land of plenty. So there was no overbuilding back in the day. I mean, that's why Lincoln Trail has the number of additions it has to it, because nobody wanted to spend a lot of money on rooms that were gonna sit empty for a few years.
Well, the cost is one thing, and the financial side is something that we certainly can look at, and I think kicking the can down the road here, we can get more than 5 years at what we're facing. But the other issue is how overcrowded the junior high currently is, and the ramifications that come from that. And it's the worst building that we have for those purposes. And so it's not just the cost, it's the immediacy of handling the kids better in those walls.
If we're moving on to the junior high, really, that has been to this point identified as the biggest need really for 3 reasons. That's the building we're closest to at capacity, and with the projections coming in, it's the building we are gonna first exceed capacity at. We've also got an age and condition problem with that building, and we've got a functionality issue with that building. That building was not laid out for a junior high, as a junior high. We put in the middle school concept and teaming, and the building just does not work well. Frankly, if we move the junior high to the present high school, we probably have some of the same problems. We have a building that wasn't built for how we operate our junior high.
In what way?
Middle school concept.
Middle school concept and teaming.
Can I ask a question? Do you guys have to pass, Lindsay and Trent said in a meeting a couple years ago that in order for another building to be built, you'd have to go to the taxpayers for that. Will taxpayers be seeing that on a ballot coming up in order to make that happen?
If we, any substantial building project that we are going to build, whether it's a high school, a junior high, or whether it's multiple additions at the same time, most probably exceeds what we will be able to do without a tax increase. Therefore, anything we do is gonna be run by the voters. And we're gonna get, and that's the reason for community engagement, because we want the public to understand what is gonna be necessary, and we wanna have a heart and a feel for where the community is. Now, how much we would have to ask for depends on which option we choose.
Have you laid out a timeline for that yet?
It was presented tentatively in the September 4th meeting.
The timeline was?
Mhm.
Can you remind me what that is?
Not off the top of our heads.
We didn't have a
Patrick, yeah.
timeline on any kind of referendum, it was premature to even discuss that.
It was a
Yeah.
30,000 foot view of possibilities, you know.
I think part of that depends on what we, on what
Yeah.
the community tells us needs to be built.
When we do this community engagement on the topic of facilities like this, are we gonna present them an array of options, or are we going to just say, what should we do?
We haven't even
We
scratched the
haven't had that
surface of
discussion.
doing any
We
community
haven't had that
engagement.
discussion.
Okay.
Okay, so
We keep delaying that discussion, which we need, but it's on the calendar now, and we're gonna have it.
So if even a new building is on the table, a junior high, a high school, whatever, a new building, new elementary school for 3, 4, 5, I don't know, whatever, could possibly be in there. I go back to this picture and it just makes me shudder. Because where are we gonna put the building?
It looks small, but it's huge. Between the north side, there's a lot of space.
In this scenario, you can put the building on either on the north side of the road or the south side.
Yeah.
There's plenty of room for a building. If it's a junior high, you're probably putting the building on one side of the road and associated athletic fields on the other. If it's a high school, we probably don't have enough space out here now, whether the road's there or not, for expanded high school.
Probably right for high school, yeah.
So if you put this road through, then you eliminate the possibility of having a high school.
I think we've already eliminated the possibility of putting a high school just by the fact we've got this building here. I don't think we've got the acreage left to do it.
How many acres is that that's still available for development?
The entire
I
area
think it
is
was 78,
78.
we used how much, anybody know?
A little more than a quarter of it, I think.
Yeah, sounds
20
better.
at the most, so there's quite
So 50 acres couldn't hold a high school?
I think
No.
there's been a thought that
You
it would
need
be
80 to 100 acres
yeah.
for high school. If you're gonna do athletic, the whole, 9
You're gonna
yards.
do the whole 9 yards and have room for future expansion. I mean, that's what we've been told by other districts, we've not.
We're just
Right, so 78 acres would be at the low side of holding only high school.
Has the district ever approached, I don't know who the owner is of the west property there, but
Yeah.
approached them about purchasing it? Especially if the utility outlay is gonna be so expensive because of where
To the west or east?
to the west.
West.
I mean, if it's not a good developable piece of land for a developer,
You're talking about the property between our property and the lake?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We've never approached.
they want a high school named after them?
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, I
think
just
that-
see this as a
And you put,
stopping point of our potential future, whatever we wanna do.
and you put a high school in here and you're gonna, that river, you're gonna need a railroad crossing, and I need another point of access. You can't run all that traffic through the roundabout.
I think that Ken's thought though on that west piece of property is something that should be brought up as community engagement too. I mean, it's,
That's an interesting idea.
that, you know, even if it was flipped for the property that we have to the south of the road, that developer would have one contiguous, you know, and if that's worth less money, but similar acreage, that we could still, you know, there'd be a little bit of a surplus for us to flip that piece of property, but,
And there
this
is
is
a
all,
north
I mean,
access.
just speculating, and then we're all north of the road, and they're all south of the road.
Oh, I like that. So you're saying offer essentially a trade for the property that they have?
It wouldn't be an even trade, because they'd be getting a nicer piece of land, so, but,
Yeah. But that overcomes the issue of the road crossing through our property.
so I just don't know how the size, the acreage of that other piece of property there, and if it's usable, but.
The other little feature of that is there's an access road just a little north of that picture. That would be a second access road for the district property if we could pull that off. But this is really speculating, I guess. It also keeps our kids away from the train tracks.
Since a pause around the table, I mentioned earlier that we would open it up for public, or for comments or questions from the floor. We've already done a little of that, but is there anyone else out in the audience tonight that has a question? Or a comment, or a thought? Yes?
Because I live on South Mahomet Road, like, having some sort of road sounds wonderful. So I know that we definitely need the access and we need the transportation and the cut-throughs, because like you're saying, the roundabout isn't going to handle all this traffic that we have. But I think the way that the conversation digressed into the overpacking of the schools is a great signal of an issue. Would we like the road? Just like my teenager would love a new car, absolutely. But does she need something more than a hot car? She does. And I think our schools are just packed out. And even with what's being developed at this moment, I think we really have to consider putting first the space for the, not just for the kids, but also for the teachers. Like, we're talking about people coming to our district because the education is so good, and that's not gonna stay at the level it's been at my entire childhood and into my kids if we don't give the teachers the space and the resources that they need. So I think, unfortunately, it's a trade out here. I mean, if we could have both, it'd be golden, but the reality is I think the focus needs to be on building a facility that's safe for the kids, that's good for the teachers, and that really bolsters education. And I don't know how, but I hope down the road that we can get this road system that we do need eventually, but what is the first primary need? And I hear the schools, space and facilities being more of a need.
Other questions?
Max, I've got a comment. Patrick, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think what I heard you say is over the life of the extension of the TIF, we would potentially be looking at a gap of about 800,000, is that right?
700,000 to 800,000.
And that amount could be smaller if we did better than the 2% projected growth.
Well, no, I think your pass-throughs would be, if the TIF grows more than the 2%, which it very probably will, because it has so far, yeah, your pass-throughs, so you're gonna get more revenue from your pass-throughs, 100% residential and 50% commercial. What I was saying is the gap, which is really what we're talking about here, what aren't you getting if this TIF is extended, is $700,000 to $800,000, $700,000 to $800,000. And that all depends on what it costs to borrow for the infrastructure there. And I'm saying that I believe, can't guarantee it, but I believe that over the course of a 12-year TIF extension, that you will see more commercial growth that will make up that money if we have the TIF. Because if we do get more TIF revenue, our intention is to invest more within the other areas of the TIF district, not just this road, that will spur economic development, commercial economic development.
So would it be fair to say that a worst case scenario would be the district over that 12-year or 13-year period comes out 800,000 to the negative?
700,000-800,000, yes.
That would be worst case, but it could be better.
But the community and the school district is all gonna benefit from this access.
Stealing my thunder. And that's exactly where I was going. You know, the district may, over a 12-year period, you know, let's say worst case scenario, lose 800,000. Again, it's likely to be less than that. You know, to all of us, $800,000 seems like a really big amount of money, but for the school district with the size of their budget over a, you know, 12+ year period, it's really not that big of an amount of money when you consider what that project does for the community as a whole. Just like you mentioned, you know, and we have family that lives on the south side of town. Opening that south side of the town up, getting all that traffic through to Prairie View, taking the pressure off of Sunny Acres, taking the pressure off of 150, opening up the parcel for the school. I mean, that has a value. It's not something you can necessarily put a number on like you can the 800, but there's a lot of value there, and I just don't want to see the board get shocked by a quote large number, because with the numbers you guys deal with, $800,000 over more than a decade, it's just not that big of a number.
So I need some help with the numbers. I didn't look at all these things you gave me tonight, so from the last meeting, I believe that the amount that they said was gonna go into the TIF over the 12-year period was just shy of $9 million, like 8.7 or something like that, right? I mean, it's just around there. So just to make the numbers easy, I'm gonna round it to 9 million just because. And all of the data that I've seen puts the district at 56% share, right? Robert sent some things about the 2020 TIF where he broke down the different contributions of the different entities. So the village was 10 point something and the district was 56%. And so if you use that contribution, that the district contributes 56%, 56% of $9 million is a little over $5 million, right? And so I guess what I'm having a hard time understanding is how the district it's gonna change over the next 12 years that we will only contribute 20%. I just don't understand that math.
Because that comes down to ratios, and when you're comparing ratios of different components, so we're talking ratios of the property tax bill across all taxing bodies in Mahomet. So that's the library, that's the village, Parkland College is included in that.
Right.
So we're talking percentages of the property tax bill, not percentages of cash and tip. So each one of those taxing bodies has a different tax rate, right?
Yeah.
And with that tax rate, that makes up a percentage of the whole dollar that's contributed to TIF.
Correct.
So if you're trying to mix ratios like that, it's gonna come out odd. We need to look at it all from the same perspective of percentage of the property tax bill or percentage of the contributed to TIF, not mix those two.
How percentage drops, because all the residential comes right back to us.
Yeah, but the residential goes back to everybody.
Right.
Right? I mean, I guess I'm
The answer to number 3 on here makes it seem like it's 3 million.
It is.
That the district is contributing to the TIF. But why is it 700,000 that we are? Why is there a discrepancy there between those two numbers, 3 million and
The
700,000?
700,000 or 800,000 I've mentioned is the difference between is the difference, not what you.
Right, the difference.
So the 700,000 that Mr. Brown's talking about is the difference between if the school district were to issue debt to conduct the road projects in a reasonable time frame, meaning around 5-6 years. So, and this is all very loose projections because we don't know what the future holds. There's a lot of variables at play. The difference between what Dr. Schultz is saying with, I'm sorry, what was that value again? You said 5 million?
It's like around 5 million.
The difference between that and the 3 million, I don't know entirely where the 5 million came from, but this $3 million value, Trent, would you be able to pull up this spreadsheet actually? Or values at least. We projected out 2% growth over a potential extension. And if you scroll all the way to the right, Trent, the contributions from the school district to the TIF is also projected at 2% growth. So over just the extension of the TIF, not the remaining life of our current TIF, we're looking at that $3 million. You might have been thinking of remaining life in the current TIF plus extension. That sounds
I mean,
closer to
I just
5
was
million.
looking at the numbers you had and multiplied by 56%, so, I mean, that's where I got my number, is just trying to guesstimate, because I didn't have this chart, and I was trying to.
And there's actually
Numbers I
there's
have.
another spreadsheet that I believe you were provided with that shows historical contributions. That was a question that we received.
That's this one, probably, which one? It's very small.
Okay.
We got it on.
Sorry, we just,
Small print.
Can we get that one that you just were
I
showing?
sent it to you on August 23rd.
That's the one from August 23rd. This one?
No, the one from
The other one is from the August 23rd.
So this one's new. I actually prepared this today in an effort to try to make this as clear as possible of what the taxing bodies have contributed to TIF. Of course, this is school focused. So there's a column, percent of the property tax bill. The blue ones are estimates because county didn't have that information available. But the column to the right that says kept in TIF is the amount of the school district's contribution annually to the TIF. That's the 50% pass through to commercial. The far right-hand column, the school district's contribution to TIF. That's exclusively the school district on the far right. You can see massive growth in that. As 50% from June of 2010 on is just 50% of commercial. We don't see that growth in other tax revenue sources. That is massive, massive growth in a very short period of time. So
To assume 2% moving forward is incredible.
very conservative.
Conservative.
But it's also all unknown. So it'd be irresponsible to predict 15% growth annually or 9% growth annually when we have no idea what the future could hold.
So when you look at the money that we're not getting, if the TIF does spur some commercial development, well, we're getting 50% of that, and that's huge. Sonny had a question earlier.
Well, it was just kind of a thought process. I'm looking around the room and I'm not seeing, I don't know how many of you have kiddos in this school. We also live off of South Mahomet Road, and having to come here just for Middletown pickup is one of the worst moments of my life. Like having to deal with people in the roundabout, and it's only pre-K through 2 parents. So I'm hearing a lot about we need more space for our kids, and we do. I also have one of the junior high that is at capacity. We do need more space. But I'm also hearing that bringing that space here, this is the land we own, right? I'm pointing to the screen even though it's not up there, trying to take it down. But we own this land already. And I can remember sitting on a committee when our oldest, who's now a sophomore in high school, before she even started kindergarten, I remember sitting on a committee with our then superintendent, having conversations about buying this land and projecting forward. And at that time thinking, well, maybe my kid would benefit from it. My high schooler has never benefited from this. So the conversations that are happening are not for the here and now. We need to be thinking, okay, we've got this space, we've already purchased it, we purchased it a long time ago. We've got a lot of opportunities here to bring space out here, whether that is a quote-unquote junior high or not, it's a space, but we can't do that without additional roadway into it. So if we're going to create more learning space and more learning opportunities for our teachers and for our students, and we have this space already, we need to be thinking about how to capitalize on that space that's already there. And the only way that that's actually really going to be feasible is to get this road built
and then have conversations with the community and as a board about how to make that learning space happen within this area. Just adding on to basic buildings, that's not gonna solve the problem. It's not gonna be a long-term fix.
The comment was made earlier, should we spend, you need buildings, should we spend money on buildings? I get that. She's not.
She did, she left.
And, Sean and Patrick were around, and so was Merle when we did this. We all had slightly different roles then, okay, but we were all involved. And I struggled when we bought this property, that we were, we're building roads, we're building a roundabout, and every dollar we spend building a roundabout and putting in sewer and all that is less dollars we had to do other things with. And I struggled. I didn't like it. And I didn't like the roundabout for a long time. It's probably still the roadway in Mahomet, quite frankly. But there's, you've got to do some things in order to be able to build buildings and to be able to have space. You've got to do things because you're part of the community. You've got to do things because it's your role in the community. I looked at those guys back then and said, well, why don't you guys build the roads? Okay, well, guess what money they have? Taxpayer money that they've got zillions of priorities for, just like we do, and not enough money to hit all the priorities. Okay? And we're the ones wanting school buildings. Okay? And then, we all took a short course on development and how that really works. And I think most people sitting around think that when a subdivision like Hunter's Ridge goes in or Country Ridge goes in, that the village of Mahomet comes in and puts those roads in, and then the builders come in and build houses. I think that's what most people think. Okay? Okay, guess what? That's not how it works. Okay? How many roads has the village of Mahomet built?
Near zero.
Near zero. Okay? We get to build the road. The developer gets to build the road, and in this case, the developer is a school district. We got to pay for that roundabout, and then we got to give it to them. Okay, and they maintain it. And that I had all kinds of problems with that. I'm telling you. I did. I'm just being honest. But if we're gonna build buildings and if there's gonna be progress in the community, then things like that happen. And we've got to figure out how to balance those objectives. And I get that. I'd like to spend every dollar, quite frankly, I'd rather not have to pay to repair things. Okay? Every once in a while I have to fix an air conditioner we already own. Well, why do we have to fix an air conditioner we already own? That air conditioner should just last forever, and we should be able to spend that money on other stuff. But guess what? We got to go fix it. Okay? I can make a, Steve's over in the corner now, I can make a case that just about every dollar he spends to keep stuff in good repair, we should really, wouldn't it be nice if we could spend that somewhere else? Okay? But we can't. And we have to keep things, and to his point, we've got to keep things good. And after a while, if we just let it go when it's not in good repair, we're being foolish stewards of taxpayer money, because then we're paying more to fix stuff.
Might be helpful for the rest of the board to understand how we ended up here specifically. We look north of town, we look north of the high school, we look north off 47, north of 74. We looked south Mahomet Road, south of the Methodist Church. We looked all over the corners of Mahomet. The reason this space was the most appealing is because it had the lowest total cost to develop because of the proximity to water and sewer. Yes, roads had to be built to get to the school. 150 or not, 150 had the water and sewer main lines. So we were closer, so every other corner going out of Greenfield was gonna cost significantly more, like 10 million more. And we only spent a little more than that just to buy all the land we had here. But we were close to being able to tap into the water and sewer. So my continuing belief is that we still benefit from that. As we build out south of where we are, that direction, we still benefit from the proximity to water and sewer. which lowers the cost significantly. And even if we pay to help build that road, so do others. So it's a shared cost and not just ours for us to build out the road. And with the road comes the water and sewer. So what would scare me is if we put that road to follow the tracks and have to pay for all the plumbing to get north.
Wait, Sean, didn't you say the sewer was not included in the road?
There's some.
Sewer is, Amos is separate, but there's utilities in these numbers as well.
So still water come through along the road.
Everything will have to get developed to the edge of the
Right.
property.
Right. So the costs are far less still at this specific location.
When this property was purchased, the number 2 choice was what is now Harvest Edge subdivision, just south of the Methodist Church on the corner there. This became the primary choice for a couple of reasons. Development costs here, first of all, the cost of the property was lower and we had more acres, so per acre cost it was a lot lower. Okay? The second reason was the development cost was gonna be lower. The third reason is, if we would have bought that property, guess what we didn't have? Access out of there to 150. Because of what we're just talking about now, the railroad crossing.
Let's not forget, South Mahomet Road could not handle the bus traffic.
Yeah.
At all. So that was it became a non-starter.
So there were lots of problems with that.
In the country road to the south.
So just fill everybody in on
Appreciate that.
Yeah,
That's great.
decisions of the past.
Yeah, bring 1,000 kids to it. Well, the junior high is, how many kids? 700, 800? Something like that.
Max, if I may
Got every roads.
if I may add a silver lining to your thinking, the maintenance side of things.
Oh, I need a silver lining.
So yes, you gave us the roads, but we have to take care of them forever. So
There was a bow on that.
if you want to do lifeable costs, I can guarantee we probably don't come out ahead on that deal.
Yeah, probably.
But that's our job.
And this came up just since, as you reviewed this sheet, that you got. And this came up last time in 2010 when we talked about this, and Lindsay can help explain this better than I can, but the school district gets, I said this last time, unique TIF. I mean, there's some communities have multiple TIFs and keep, the city or the village keeps 100% of it. This one with the pass-throughs, all these years that the school district has received 100% residential pass-throughs, up until the formula changed recently last year, the school district still got extra funding from the state to make up as if you still had, as if you weren't getting any of the pass-throughs. So the school district was, and back then I called it double dipping, and that's a bad term, I guess, but the school district was essentially getting some money made up. It wasn't all of it, I don't know what the totals were, but back when we looked at this years ago, it was a significant amount of money every year. Because the state viewed the TIF as we can help change this formula for the school district to help make up some of that loss.
Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore.
It doesn't happen anymore.
But for us, it worked really well.
But for several years of the TIF,
Daylight
the school district was getting, a significant chunk of change from the state, as if the TIF was impacting from a residential side, and it was not.
Okay. One aspect of this we've not touched on is, we had the joint meeting several weeks ago. If what ends up happening down the road from a facility standpoint is a new junior high, the village has an interest in the existing property. We've not touched on that at all tonight. Don't know if anyone's got any thoughts or comments on that, but
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
At the meeting, Sean said that the price of that building plus the properties would be $750,000, and he looked at UMass to confirm that. When was that set, and has that ever been discussed in an open meeting before?
That has been a discussion point back and forth with the village that has not been set yet.
True statement.
So if, and Sean and Patrick, this is kind of for you, if the village were to purchase the junior high plus the other properties, do you have the money to do that, or do you have to go to the taxpayers to get the money for that?
We are budgeting right now for those purposes, yes.
Does the same stand with the swimming facility that you were talking about? Do you have to go to the taxpayers for that?
Very likely, yes. Any building or new construction of the community center, rec center, whatever that thing looks like, we did the mark study, that will be a tax, that would be the community involvement and community engagement. We do not have the money to pay for that, no.
Can you explain to me how the junior high is landlocked? I mean, I understand the three sides, the one in the front and the two on the side, but you do have the soccer field in the back, and moving the soccer field may not be an option, but I'm just trying to understand how it's landlocked.
Yeah, that sits a lot lower, I think. It's always been our understanding that building that way would be difficult.
Have there been studies on that?
I think the other, no, there's just been talks with the architects informally. But the other part of the problem with that is that building's kind of cobbled up now to begin with, and doesn't work well for the middle school model. And I don't think further additions on that would not solve that problem, it would only enhance it.
What would a building look like that was good for a middle school model?
Have like pods or be designed around the team concept. I mean, the junior high is the old high school, and so that's in name it's the junior high. And so if the middle school format and teaming format is something that seems to be working well, I think our teachers and it's been a good change from what I can tell.
Have you seen that? I have a friend who teaches up north, and there's our like hallway, and there's like 4 rooms, and the rooms have a door, but then there's sliding doors, and so they can go out into the area and congregate like in their teams, if that makes sense. So, and that's how I've seen it.
So teams of teachers are grouped together, and there's you might have a common area for a team.
Right.
So instead of having, here's a practical, this is from my understanding, I'm not an expert on this, but like right now, all the science rooms are in a science room area. If you're building it for teams, each team area would have a science room in it. So it'd be a science room here, a science room here, and this team uses this team uses, that kind of thing. You have a science, English, and math, whatever here, a science, English, math here.
Is it possible that the district would ever go back to the junior high model, and then if you built a building to be like that, you would be in the same position as you are now with a high school not really functioning for the middle school model?
That's a great question. So I think a building built around the middle school concept is more easily, also can be utilized as a junior high if you go back to the traditional junior high schedule, but not the opposite. So have, building it like the junior high that we have, it's physically more difficult to really embrace the teaming concept of a middle school model. So I think to answer your question, if a middle grade school was built and it was built around the middle school concept of teams of teachers, and then somewhere down the road there was a decision like, let's go back to the junior high model, that building could still easily be utilized in that manner.
And I think the other part of the answer is, well, anything is always possible. I think right now we feel real good about what we've been able to do educationally through that model. So, there's a question, yeah.
Yep. When it comes to looking at a rec center, using the junior high as a rec center, if it's not adequate and needs lots of maintenance and expense for our school district tax money, how we're just transferring that maintenance and cost over to a rec center when it's not really designed for a rec center either. How do you convert that into a rec center that's useful without spending more taxpayer money rather than just starting from scratch for a rec center? I don't see how it's saving taxpayer money, kind of, I think, I don't know if it's different buckets,
That's a good
but
question to
how
ask
do
at a
you?
village meeting.
Yeah, like, I just don't understand
Yeah,
how
Mark's
the
fine.
junior high would be a good rec center.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
So we looked at the feasibility, we started the Mark facility study, not having a location. Just in general, what would it look like, how much do we need, acres, size, amenities, core spaces, all that good stuff. So we have that study out there. When the junior high came into focus as an option, we did a subsequent study on that. So, okay, can we apply the Mark to the junior highs? To answer your question very directly is 40% or so of the junior high, we don't need nor do we want. It'd be demo. Slow demolition, gone. And that's pretty much there's different wings, and that was the older wings, I think. Can't remember the exact locations, but for the most part, we're taking the good parts of the junior high, and the rest of it we don't need. And that was the model we looked at. And the space-wise, as far as not only the physical hard space, but also the outdoor space met our Mark criteria. So that's where we're at today.
And I'll just add too, that there's, that whenever we look at land, there's a tremendous price tag for land for us to buy to build a facility from scratch. So if we're talking about our desire, which is $750,000, we would have a portion of that would be for us to acquire 13 acres, and that's included in that. And then the leftover portion is the land alone worth, let's just call it $500,000. We'd be paying more than that to buy land to build a rec center and an eventual expansion of that rec center.
Anything else around the table?
I just had one question that occurred to me. You said that the utilities would be going in with this road. Would the village be recouping any of those costs for those utilities from developers as they add and develop onto those sites? Because that infrastructure is already there?
Minus the EMIS, no. That's the incentive, right, for that to develop. Now, the sucking cost of building a road and storm sewers and whatnot within the public right-of-way is removed off the table. It makes it more attractive for them to develop that space. And they're still gonna do all the off-site utilities.
Right.
All this, roads and interior roads and sewers and water.
Yeah, EMS can recover some of that.
EMIS is across the board, everybody. There is no exceptions, we don't give waivers to EMIS. Everybody that is in the EMIS zone or district pays the EMIS fee. And that is for the long-term growth for our sanitary sewer system, which is different than your localized sewer needs. At the end of the day, it all gets to EMIS, that's the main trunk line. But I hope that answered that.
EMIS is East Mahomet Interceptor Sewer, if anyone wants to know what that is.
So that's lift stations and things like that, is that what?
It's more than that. but
What's the
it's-
infrastructure for that?
Yeah, it's where everything pipes into that line. From all the development will pipe into that line, and then that line carries it to the plant.
And that'll be going to the existing plant?
Yes. And again, our existing plant has expansion capabilities in the future.
So part of the incentive to the developer is that we put in the road and the infrastructure, and that is then more attractive for them to come because they don't have to put those costs in.
Yeah.
At least the main, the road. They're gonna still have off-site costs in their interior plans, where those may be. But
North, south, east, west, there's lots of infrastructure that would still be put in for any developer. By splitting the land there, where it says developer $3 million, you've got two different landowners, Atkins to the south and another landowner to the north side. You're basically on that, you're creating an opportunity for both developers to have to open up development in that area that would have been, years. Our projection always with the road to connect to the school, 30 years. I mean, can we stand to wait 30 years? That's always the numbers. Could be longer, but that's the numbers to be able to do that. So.
But connection fees to those main lines are gonna be the same as anywhere else in Mahomet.
correct.
have all of the people whose land this has gone through been contacted about the use of this land? And have they been paid for this land?
No. What, if this is something that moves forward, then we have to start having deeper conversations with landowners. We have talked to both landowners to the east before. We've also talked to the owner of the land there to the west of the school. Our intention would be not to pay for that right of way. I mean, if the TIF district is going to pay for, that infrastructure to go through that land, our desire we would be against, and again, I would say, from a developer standpoint, it'd be stupid to come to the village and say, you pay me for that 60-foot right of way through my land, and I'll let you build a road through that land. That would be possibly that somebody would say, but I think they would be stupid to say it because.
And they would be met with opposition.
And they would be met with opposition. So I just don't believe we'd have any issues securing right of way through that land. It would be stupid.
So no one would be paid?
No, they
Anywhere
wouldn't.
along with-
No, they wouldn't be paid because it's 60-foot right of way. That's a lot.
Every developer there would love for you
Yeah.
to get a road to their property, and it's not on their dime.
Because as I said, for the Prairie View roadside, there's been at least 2 in the last 4 or 5 years that said no to buying that piece on the corner. So.
The curve that's there now, so you can cross the railroad at 90 degrees. The curve to the northeast, was there some consideration there also for making more developable lots for that development?
Talking about Prairie View Road curve?
Up here, it curves
The
up.
left
I
curve.
think the consideration was the degree of the curve. You're talking in here.
No, he's talking about the other
No,
side.
I'm not, right where Max is pointing.
Right, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, I'm curious if
Well, an ideal
Ken's
world,
idea about the
you
land
leave some nice
has-
developable lots between your road and your life.
if we could straighten out that road.
You can't.
There's
Like I said
minimum,
earlier.
minimum design criteria for that speed and,
Yeah.
and those
And
curves.
Merle, just that little piece there between the road and the lake,
Yeah.
Conway we would come unglued if somebody tried to build stuff there. We are giving up part of our commons to make this happen, and we're happy to do it. But we have a lot of interest in seeing green space on the north part of that road. And evidently very nice.
So I thought I heard from you that it was a higher likelihood of being approved by the railroad if it was 90 degrees, not an absolute.
Not highly, but this has already been,
Okay.
at least the preliminary discussions. What we have in place now is what we
Okay.
move forward with final
Gotcha.
design.
Any headway on leaving crossings, or are we still giving up the crossing?
This is kind of the first domino that needs to fall.
So has it gone anywhere?
What's
It's
that?
not gone anywhere though, right?
No,
When is a decision on this TIF extension gonna be made?
good question.
You wanna make sure that we have adequate discussion about it?
When does it expire?
2023 is the expiration, and I think we pointed out in the last meeting, we did, and I apologize, but, I think Sean put up kind of a timeline. We have a bond representative that has pretty much told us we can come out and borrow money at any time. So the sooner it gets done, the quicker the road happens. But again, it does take act of the state legislature to extend TIF. And it takes supporting.
Legislature would be before the
Legislature.
spring session.
It would be before the spring session. So it would take supporting letter from each taxing body.
Our goal is
To
next,
help.
our goal is next year. Is the timeline we put out there, but
So we don't, the village to go out and bond for $7 million does not have to wait until the current TIF expires. If we have a TIF extension, we can go out there and bond. We've already checked that out. Because our desire is to get this road built as soon as possible.
So next calendar year, is that what you're saying, 2020?
and that's a long tenant, but yes.
Can the
Would you need
village,
a letter from the board or from the district?
board's acting on behalf of the district, so it'd be, you probably have to pass a resolution of support, is my guess. From each taxing body. It's a little bit, the TIF extension is different than a TIF creation. It goes through the TIF review board. So in this case, we have to have support from each taxing body for the extension, then to lobby to Springfield for that. And Springfield makes the ultimate decision as far as yes or no.
And all of these other taxing bodies you've had discussions with, and you haven't had any discussions with them?
Just tentative discussions as far as our intent, of which started in December. You know, when we talked about the railroad crossing, that was the first thing we talked about as far as the remaining TIF funds. And then, I have to go back to my timeline, but the idea of extension was brought up for discussion purposes only at one of the TIF review board meetings. Just to kind of put a feeler out there, and that's where we are today, so.
And if one of these entities says no, does that kibosh the whole
I
thing?
don't
What's
think-
the
I think it's
tipping
just
point for moving versus not
We
moving?
don't 100% know that answer, so, for you, sorry, but it likely could still move forward if you have a majority of the taxing bodies. Just like a TIF review board, you can have a majority of the TIF review board recommend to the village board to pass the TIF. I should know this answer, but I don't even know if they voted, if the TIF review board said that we don't support this TIF, I think the village board can still approve a TIF. But I know when we got into this TIF initially, there was a lot of discussion and trying to have cooperations with the other taxing bodies. And back then it was determined to come up with the TIF district that we had back in 2001 year. And I'm here to tell you that did not work at all, which is why we came back to get the change in 2010. Yeah.
Sorry, say that again. So you could, if these taxing bodies said no, the village could still vote to extend the TIF? Is that what you said?
No, not extend the TIF, no.
You
No,
have to
the
create
TIF.
it.
I was talking about
Create it, okay, thank you.
I don't know, sorry.
Is there any other project that's intended to be used with this TIF
I
extension?
think that was one of your questions, and if somebody had that question and you see what our answer was, we don't have a specific answer, or a specific project, but I can tell you that we have something in mind that could be used, but whether or not that project gets going on its own merits beforehand, I can tell you it's a cost prohibitive project that is a road intersection that is very, very expensive to happen. And I'm here to say that if we did this extension, it would mean, some developmental properties that could be developed sooner rather than later if this work was done. But that might be that might be hard to predict that, because we know what it takes right here, $7 million. So we know the conservative estimates. We don't think we can go out and get our bond consultant to be able to go out and get us bonds that they can sell if we came back and said, we want to do an $8 million project and throw another $1 million into something else. If we can do that, I think we would do that. So if it comes to that point and we can borrow $8 million and help fund another area as well, trust me, we're doing it.
You talk about the argument of whether TIFs work or not. It's a philosophical argument, but if you look at the sheet we got here, okay, and they just mentioned it, when this TIF was put in, the pass-through was so high, it really didn't function as a TIF. It really didn't. And in 2010 is when we came back and the TIF renegotiated it, and that was when it went to 50% commercial pass-through, okay? And you can look since 2010, what exploded? Well, our contribution to the TIF exploded, but what also exploded is commercial pass-through back to us, because remember the commercial pass-through back to us equals what we put in the TIF. It's the same number, okay? So you can, while TIF is a philosophical argument, you can look at this and say, you know what? When we tweaked it and let it operate more like a TIF, it really worked. Not only did the TIF get more tax money, but we got more tax money. So, anyway.
Do we have to draft a new IGA for this?
We will have to draft a new IGA at some point, yes, because right now, current IGA has us fully funding the roads with no mechanism in place to do that, and putting roads where
We really don't want them now.
where nobody really wants roads now.
Would the village be amenable to including in the new IGA that once this project is funded from the TIF, we get 100% pass-through? So in other words, we stop contributing to the TIF?
Well, I think the full project would be, for us, it would be a bond that would stretch out for 12 years.
No, I get that. And I'm saying that while we're still paying the bond for this project, the district is still chipping in. But if there is more rapid growth than the 2%, and now there's more money available for like the really expensive intersection you were talking about, we wouldn't be obligated to be chipping in for that. Do you follow me?
I think we'd probably have to discuss it internally, and of course our board would have to have discussions, but my personal belief and my thought on that, and I can't speak for the board, but my own opinion would be no. Because that would not be conducive of the TIF and what we're trying to achieve with the TIF overall. And then also that looking at the other taxing bodies as well, we're gonna treat everybody this, hopefully the same. So at that point, it wouldn't make sense to me.
So then what about including in the IGA that once this project is done, we dissolve the TIF? If the TIF is dissolved, we wouldn't be doing it.
Well, it's gonna be a 12-year now, right?
Yeah, this
They
would
have
resolve
to-
at the end of that anyway.
This projection is, and we ran the numbers and we were, kind of surprised our numbers were that close till we had the bond projections from the bond council, but we need the 12-year extension to pay for this. And again, going back to the percentage, you're right, it could be more than 2% return. That's for Robert and Trent to kind of, obviously have all the number side, but that's what
we
we've been
see
planning on.
historically. It's way more than 2% growth.
But your pass-throughs are way more, so the money, if it is way more than that, you're getting significant
No, I get
amount
that.
more. Yeah.
I get that, but I'm saying,
What Ken's saying is, once the TIF takes, if your bond is $9 million, once the TIF takes in $9 million, if it takes it in 3 years or it takes it 12 years to take it in, that as soon as it takes in enough money to cover this road, that the TIF is dissolved.
I don't think that's good economics for us. I think if we're gonna be involved in the TIF, let it run, just like Max said, the dollars worked already 10 years ago, it shows.
Right.
If I wanna support a TIF, I wanna support a TIF because
You
the
wanna see more
economic
commercial
development
development
accrues to
on
our
Right.
benefit.
Yeah, and again, I can't prove this or I can't guarantee this, but I'm here to say that gap, and that gap is what I keep going back to, that gap of the difference is still gonna be relatively the same. If you get more revenue and the projections are higher, that gap is still gonna be that $850,000. You're likely in the course of that 12 years gonna see significantly amount more because of money we're putting in the TIF. Not just this 7 million, because of other money. If there is higher growth and we're putting more money into that TIF district and infrastructure that primes that land for development, you're gonna see significant amount of growth more than that. So if we can't put that money back into the TIF district, if there is excess, and we're, tied to just this right here, and if we're fortunate enough to get more revenue, and we can't put that back in, you're not gonna see that growth.
so the problem I have though is you're asking us to give up our tax revenue for potential projects that we will have no say over. Now, if we put into the IGA that once this project is fully funded with 9 million or 7 million, whatever, our pass-through goes to 100, so essentially we're not chipping anything in. At that point in time, in 2026, we could come back together and say, there's another road that really would have been beneficial for the district. Can we renegotiate the pass-through? And then we can do that, right? We can amend it like we did in 2010. So can we, for this, because this is the project we know is in front of us, can we agree that this is what we're signing on for with this extension? And then we'll come back to the table if there's another project.
Just remember too, though, that there's other taxing bodies that are giving a percentage, you know, that are donating into the TIF as well. I represent the library, and we're not gonna benefit from this road particularly, but because it's good for the community as a whole, we're willing to do that. So to me, to say, well, the school's only gonna get the benefit from the first 7 million, after that, the benefit might go to somebody else, so maybe it goes to the library district, or maybe it does something else, so. Don't forget that it's not just the school that's part of this.
Well, and I would suggest that other taxing bodies have the same offer extended to them, that this is the project you know that's on the table. Once this project is funded, bring those folks back into the picture too, to make sure that they want to be on board with the next project.
Like 2 points, I guess, and John said it, and that was my point, that there's more people at play than just the village and the school district. The second point is, we all rise with the tide. We all answer the same taxpayers, and that's the point, is they expect us to work together, and try to find those benefits and win-wins. I can tell you that, our focus will continue to be Route 150, and to finish the Route 150 corridor plan, of which has progressed over the course of this TIF. So yes, there are other projects that we should, and we would be short-sighted if we said, this is our only project, and we're gonna ignore the rest of 150. And that was and that's, again, I can't talk for our board, but my personal belief, and goes on to his point, is we wanna see the TIF reach its full potential. Unfortunately, the full potential for this TIF has pass-throughs. It's much different than a normal TIF. If we didn't have pass-throughs when this thing started, we wouldn't be here tonight talking about it, because all this would have been done. And that's the point. So I think it's a much slower grind to get to these end results that we see on the back end as far as how this money starts, accumulating. So that was where I was going with as far as the initial opposition. Can we talk about dissolving TIF and renegotiating pass-throughs? Absolutely. It may not be me, it may not be anybody here in this room. It'd be the future, future boards and future leaders, but those are always the options on the table. And quite frankly, that was the option in 2010, was if we're not gonna get this TIF working, let's just dissolve it and be done. Because if anything, it was more of a headache than it was a benefit for anybody. So I'm glad we renegotiated, and now we're all reaping the benefits from that. And I say we, the community, not the taxing bodies, it's who we represent. So that's where we stand. I think I answered your question where I believe, but are we open those discussions? Sure. Yes, we're going to look at the IGA and come up with what works, but at the end of the day, we're trying to come up with a win-win here of the information we know now and try to plan forward with that.
So I take your point, and I think my original suggestion, you're right, was short-sighted to just simply dissolve it after that trigger. But I think adjusting the pass-throughs to 100% so that we can have a motivation to bring ourselves back to the table and talk about how the TIF will be used moving forward, that seems like a better choice.
I kind of follow the good neighbor thought here, that we've got good people at the table here today, and there is only one body here that's gonna lead the charge for that future development, and that's gonna be the village. If it's a sewer at another interchange, or it's another interchange, we're not gonna lead that project. Neither is the library. It's gonna be the village. They've got the people coming to them, they've got the insight, it's going to be them. I trust, as much as, and we have IGAs for the reasons, that we will get the benefit from having this thing run its course. And that to shut it off early, it would indeed be short-sighted. I think we ought to take every opportunity we can, because these guys actually have the long-term view, because you don't put in water and sewer if you don't have your view. Is that as soon as they've got excess money after this road and it's all paid off and we've all become, got all our money back, is the next thing I want you to do is go east and north and do it again, because we will benefit from that. biggest benefit to the east and north on commercial development will finally grow beyond what we've done in the past 10 years.
All I'm saying is, hopefully if that happens in 5 years, let's come back to the table and talk. That's all
I
I'm
think the
suggesting.
cost of restarting after 5 years is too high, and the risk of not starting at all. So,
We also have to consider that the district has a larger geographical tax base, that we need to consider the folks that are not part of the Village of Mahomet that are contributing to us. So when we make this decision about what we're doing with our tax revenues, we need to be considerate of that as well.
the only upside beyond normal growth, call it 2%, call it 3% or something like that, the only upside is development. So the development that pays extra money, that pays us in that process, particularly commercial development, benefits everybody in our school district because it lowers the cost for everybody else. If we get commercial development that doesn't have kids come with it, it's the best possible thing for us. If we can incentivize that commercial development, we all win.
I was gonna say even empty buildings, you still get the same.
Yeah. Earlier, somebody mentioned that we've got empty commercial space right now, and we do. But, 6 years ago, we had no empty commercial space because we had no commercial space. And there's been an concerted effort to put that in. Now again, personal development philosophies aside, the fact that that space is there and being leased, in Sangamon and Maine, they're way ahead of what they thought it would be. Out here in front of us on 150, they're gonna build the next building. That's their decision to do that. I'd probably wanna be a little forward before I did, but they feel good enough about it, we're gonna do it. And there's spots for people that wanna come in, and we've seen what's happened since 2010 with commercial, when we spent some commercial money in the TIF. Not only has what we have, quote, given up went up, but what we received in the past through matches what we gave up. And we've received a whole lot more than we would have on the trajectory we were on before.
What year did this building get built or start getting built?
We bought the property, we negotiated in 2010, bought the property in 2011, and we opened here in 14. I've slept lots of times since then, but I think those days are.
So that could have spurred on some of the commercial residential growth too. The idea that we were committed to a school being here, but.
Sure.
Yeah, you build it new and it gets people excited,
Stoplight.
Right, you have all
And
that
then the
stuff.
TIF paid for the stop.
Yeah.
TIF district.
Library was first.
TIF district, I mean, it's minor, but the TIF district paid for the turn signals on the stoplight, which wasn't cheap when those were added late.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a request from school district.
Yes.
I'm looking at South Mahomet Road out the other direction towards South 47. Is that gonna be expanded in turn lanes? Cause if we're gonna make this a major pass through to Prairie View, where do we get, are we going to expand South Mahomet Road and are we gonna put a stoplight on that end and then we're gonna put a stoplight on Prairie View and who
You're
pays for
talking
all
about
that?
maybe from the crossing back towards 47.
Yeah, the current South Mahomet Road, that's right now, it's facing traffic, right? It's facing traffic. Are we gonna have to expand that with turn lanes? And if we're gonna increase traffic from one side of town to the other, how are we gonna pay or who pays for the turn lanes and expanding the current South Mahomet Road? Plus looking at stoplights on both ends, Prairie View and 47.
To answer your question, who pays for that, the Village of Mahomet Township, so they actually have a piece of the South Mahomet Road, and IDOT.
Is it possible though? Is that gonna happen?
I would say when things are warranted, it will happen, but right now it's not warranted.
So,
You
but
know,
if
a
we
lot of the
increase-
existing traffic that we're talking about is on South Mahomet Road now, and it's going up Sunny Acres Road or through the neighborhood, it exists now.
Yeah.
And that will continue to happen.
So what is it, I mean, it's facing traffic and there's like actual houses and driveways off of there, not arteries and major, roads. So is it possible to put that much traffic on South Mahomet Road now? I mean, or in 2 years, is it really possible if we're gonna make this a major thoroughfare, is it possible
Yes.
without spending a ton more money, widening it and
It's possible without doing anything right now.
to leave it? So if we take half the traffic on 150 and put it on South Mahomet Road, that's gonna be deemed safe with a traffic study.
I don't know if it's half of 150 or not. And those are all projections that will work itself out as far as once you build infrastructure, things rebalance themselves.
But we'll have the money to build and expand one, or South Mahomet Road, and all those homeowners are gonna lose property on.
We have no intentions of making future improvements to South Mountain Road as part of this discussion. When it
So this
warrants
road-
it and needs it, we'll have those discussions at that time, but at
And
this
this
time.
road that we see here is gonna be facing traffic, or is it gonna have turn lanes in the middle?
Which road? This,
The proposed road, is that gonna be facing traffic, or is it gonna have turn lanes or right turn cutouts, whatever you call those things, slow down lanes? What's the plan for that?
You mean suicide lanes.
bi-directional turn lane.
I don't know the right term for it, but you know what I'm
Sorry,
saying.
he knows the term.
The slow down lane,
Yes.
turn to the right where you pull out and then can turn right, or?
It turns out,
Yeah.
I believe so, yes.
Does it plan for all that in there too? Because I mean,
In
once you get a shortcut, people are gonna use a shortcut. I mean, that's what happens on Sunny Acres. And so do we have the money in the budget, and how does that come in? Or can you extend the TIF all the way down, past the railroad tracks? Is that-
This section that you see up here is driveways, there's no driveways. You will have roads, but there are no driveways. So when you build a new road like this that goes through, you won't have, say some residential develops, you won't have driveways that back up into that road.
You have another road.
Yeah, you have a road that comes off of it and then
Right.
goes to driveway.
But
Yeah,
you
so
could
it would be designed that
potentially-
way, yeah.
You could potentially have it cause South Mahomet Road now has actual driveways
Yes.
off of it instead of turning onto a
And
street.
this will not be like that.
It'd be more like how Country Ridge was developed with like Deer Run Drive. And then that splits off into the neighborhood. Would be more logical. Here.
Board members, any closing questions? We're not, again, there's no action on this tonight. This is discussion. Okay. As far as next steps, you've got written answers to some of your questions. If you've got more questions, get them in.
Thank you for the answers to the questions.
Yeah, thank you, get those out. At some point, when we have some clarity on the timetable, there would be a resolution to support the extension of the TIF. Of course, the junior high discussion will pick up in the community engagement process. And we'll be looking at all of this over the next several months. The revisions, any revisions for a new, revisions is probably not a new intergovernmental agreement, of course, is dependent on where we go with the TIF. Because if we're gonna get rid of the current plan to pay for the roads, we have to have a new plan to pay for the roads. So, we are not going to go into closed session. So if there is nothing further for right now, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. Before we adjourn, I do want to thank the gentleman from the village for being here tonight.
Thank you.
You know, for those of us that were around in 2011, in 2010, when we worked on buying this property, you know, I think these guys were around in different capacities
Mr. Metzger too.
But it became real evident to some of us, I think, that were around when we had those discussions, that there was a lot of history between the village and the school district, and it wasn't all good. You know, we had people talking, upset still about things that happened when the high school was built in 1979 and 1980, and that was coming up in 2011. And I think it became real clear to a few of us that we really needed to work together moving forward more and open up communication better going forward more. I think the community not only benefits from that, but I think the community expects that. They expect us not to operate in a vacuum, and they expect us to communicate and to cooperate to a large degree whenever we can. Sean and Patrick and the folks at the village office and those of us that were involved here in the board at the time really worked hard to kind of change that mindset and the direction. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate you guys being here tonight, so thank you. Almost forgot, I wanted to get that in. So we had a motion to adjourn and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adjourned. Thank you all for being here tonight.